So they had to literally count down 1, 2, 3, and then he fell one way and the other stuff fell the other way, and it had to be like a choreographed dance to make sure that all the body parts fell in a way that felt real and delivered the goods when it spilled out its contents like a piñata. Hey there, I'm Craig Perry, the producer of the Final Destination franchise, and today we're gonna go through every single kill from all of the movies. And it goes without saying, spoilers ahead, everybody dies. Let's get into it. Final Destination 1 was released in 2000 and directed by James Wong, ultimate tally of 292 deaths. The plane explosion from the first Final Destination is both memorable and iconic. We had an enormous section of a 747 about 20 feet up on top of this 10,000-pound hydraulically articulated gimbal that could pitch and yaw the interior of the craft. After a long day of shooting, a lot of people were actually getting motion sickness from being on the plane because they felt like they were on a plane that was going through severe turbulence. And because it was so real, people really, I think, gave performances that feel palpably credible. There's real authenticity here. Here, oh, that gentleman who just flew out of the plane, that was his first job as a stuntman, and he wound up being the stunt rigger for Final Destination Bloodlines. By the way, for me, that one gout of blood that you see splashing up on the roof, it's complete non sequitur. There's no basis for it, but just that sort of lizard brain understanding that something terrible has just happened to somebody that generated that amount of blood. I think the opening plane sequence in Final Destination is not only memorable, but all of the effects hold up, and it has stood the test of time as one of the preeminent plane crashes in the history of movies. Todd slips in the bathtub and gets strangled by a clothesline. The way we did the water that was tracking him, that was not CGI, that was real water. We built like one of those old games where you have a marble going down a maze and you kind of twist and turn and pitch and yaw to get it to go through the maze. We had the floor like that so that they could tilt it and make the water go exactly where they wanted it to go with just shifting that pitch and yaw so it would go and follow him as he walked. Look at the shadow in the back, that weird shadow that appears in the mirror. That is a sort of vestige of the studio concerned about whether or not they needed to have some visual representation of death. But I think that Todd's death here is one of the purest examples of Final Destination cinema, because you get a single character in a finite location with all of these things happening around him or her that they don't notice, but the audience does. We actually did a triple edit. We just did a loop of the image so we get a sense that it's looping around his neck before he falls. That was something that was done editorially because we were, like any production, really rushed to get through our day. And the reshoots that we did here, we realized that we needed to have the soap bottles get tipped over and spill into that. Otherwise, it could sell that he would easily stand up. But imagine you're just hanging there and you can't get any traction. It sort of amplifies the fear that comes through. That's always pleasant. Look at that. That's for the kids. Poor Terry getting splattered after the argument with her boyfriend.
If you want to waste your life beating the shit out of Alex every time you see him, then you can just drop dead.
This was something that originally there were multiple cameras that captured the action just because we, want to see if we can get it right. But editorially, it became very clear that the best way to sell the impact was to actually do it in a oneer. There she is, and she's taken out. What's interesting is in the editing room, they realized because it was a flat nose bus, they were able to put a very thin fuzzy wipe at the front of the bus. So we could have the real actress stepping into frame right up to the point where she gets hit. So you never have a moment where you see the transition into a dummy. You're seeing a live person, the persistence of motion, wham, she gets taken out. And I think that's the reason why it's so shocking. The audiences for the first few previews went so bananas for that moment that we had to add length to the shot of the Alka-Seltzer in the glass afterwards, just for them to sort of like get their sea legs and get their nerves settled down so they could listen to the dialogue in the next scene. It was one of the most gratifying moments I've ever had making movies. Val Luton, who was the teacher, impaled in the chest by a kitchen knife, is a pretty involved and complicated sequence. Now, if you'll notice, there's a knife in the stained glass window in the background, and what's about to happen? Boom, she actually gets not only a pierce in the mouth, but she gets impaled in the chest with a kitchen knife. So there's a lot of foreshadowing that if you are willing or able to look, we've woven through a lot of these sequences where you actually get a chance to see what's going to happen to a character if you pay attention to their actions, the song choices, and the production design. Layering all of these different things that you're seeing come to pass now, where you have the crack in the glass and it's cold vodka from the freezer. If you think how many cuts are going on in the sequence to get her onto the ground. And this is another example of how we as the audience know that that's on a knife block. She's not clearly paid attention, and there she goes. Billy decapitated by a piece of metal that's been flung at him by a passing train. Or as I call it, Thursday.
It ain't my time.
One of the things about this scene is some of the characters are thinking that they don't believe what's going to happen, so they're going to be fine. So they're not particularly worried. So when the car stops, initially Carter isn't that upset. But then when he starts to realize he can't open the door, he can't undo his buckle, and the train is coming, that maybe all of this is true and I need help to get out of here. Devon Sawa has pulled Carter out. Who's next? And that's where we sort of see the demonstration of how the rules work. If that's the case, who's next? It's gonna be him. And kersplash. What's also interesting, earlier in the movie, when he's watching the Flight 180 take off before it explodes and they've been like kicked off the plane travels right across his eyes going up. And that was a foreshadowing of how he was gonna get taken out at the end. Carter gets crushed by Le Café Miro 81, the sign in Paris. This was a reshoot, a significant reshoot. The audience was very clear in what they were responding to and what they did not like, and they did not like the original ending. They tore the seats of the theater and threw them at the screen. So Jim and Glenn came up with this ending that sort of calls back the impact of the bus hit, but in a very clever and interesting way by taking the action to Paris, where you think everything's going to be safe. But if you look at the actual sign as it comes back down, what does it read? 180, the number of the flight. The reshoots for FD1, when the bus hits the thing that swings up and hits the sign, it was like a do not park sign that had been a metal band affixed, and that got knocked off, caromed off the building, and hit the stunt guy. He had 47 stitches. Literally, like, his skin flaps over his face, and he, like, falls out. The shot's in the movie, but he stood up, and he goes, medic, and, like, he took his hand away, and but he wound up coming back to set later that night. His head was been shaved, he had staples in there. He's like, can I see the shot? I'm like, you, sir, are a rare breed. Yes, you can. Enjoy. Final Destination 2 from the year 2003 that was directed by David Ellis. Total kills, 27. The log truck accident in the opening of Final Destination 2. What I think is most fascinating about this whole sequence is not just the intensity of it and the physicality of it, but the practicality of it. You feel all of the stunt work, you feel all of the crash cars, but one of the things that I think is most telling is that most of the logs that you see are digital. It was so advanced for the time. The fact that this sequence still holds up today, I think is a testimony to Joe Bauer, who did the visual effects and then went on to do Game of Thrones and did very well there. But it's also a testimony to how David Ellis, the director, a legendary stuntman in his own right, was able to integrate the physical, practical stunts like this with the digital work that needed to get done. This sequence was shot over a period of a week. They did all this stuff, the stunt work, the crashes. And on the other side, we did all the dialogue and tow work. And David would jump on a motorcycle and go spiraling and spinning down to go and make sure all the cameras were set up the way he wanted for this incredible action, and then go zipping back over to get in the tow rig so we could continue to do the dialogue. And I think all of this stuff here, you can imagine it happening when you're going down the road. Just the prospect of a water bottle going under your brake. Can you imagine if you reach down into the well of your car to grab that water bottle, and then you get up and guess what's in front of you? The person who stopped. You slam the brakes and you wind up like this guy, looking like, you know, something that fell on the floor at a barbecue. And I also really love the shock value of the log going and hitting Officer Burke through the windshield. And you think, oh, it's there. We digitally added his face onto the dummy, so again, it feels tactile and real. Your lizard brain says, oh my God, the guy's really in the car. The log crashes through that windshield, and then you cut wide and you see it come out the back, and you don't see anything else but there's a big mass of blood and meat on the end of the log as it exits the vehicle.
What's going on here?
There's gonna be a huge pileup.
So now, in an unexpected twist that we wanted to shake up the formula, our lead character, distraught over the premonition, she doesn't know what to do. She's trying to convince Officer Burke that it's real and everybody's in danger. The cars start crashing down the way. It looks like it's true, and then out of the blue, He pulls her from danger, and a truck smashes right into the car containing her friends, Shayna, Frankie, and Dano, killing them instantly. And the thing that I find most interesting is that we've now spent like 15 minutes of the movie getting to know these people, getting to know the dynamic, and suddenly the very cast that you thought was the cast in this movie are gone. And that's when you realize, oh, it was never about those kids in the car. It was about all the people on the on-ramp who were waiting to get in the highway. That's the people on this movie. We just knew that if we could capture what we had in our heads, it would be both memorable, but I don't think anybody knew that we would have the cultural traction that we did get with the log truck. Clear Rivers and Eugene incinerated from an oxygen explosion in the hospital. The female lead from the first movie and the second movie is instantly killed at this moment deep. And look at that shot. Totally unexpected, by the way. We were very lucky that the dummy went right at camera. But now you're thinking, wait a second. If they can kill off Allie Larder, Clear Rivers, nobody's safe. Pat gets impaled through the head via a broken PVC pipe, and then nearby Rory is, oddly enough, trisected. Can you believe saying these things out loud that this is actually what we're gonna watch? But let's get to it. We wanted to make sure that we sold these bits and pieces so that the connective tissue between what is plausible and credible to happen is actually there. Because if you don't have it work, the audience goes, I don't believe that little bit of thing would happen. Then the whole sequence falls apart. So we just had to go to this place to make sure everything connected. And this was a great surprise for us, because you don't ever expect that of everything that she's gone through, that's the way it's gonna go down.
Could you be a little quieter with that thing, please?
Yeah, sure. I'll just put it on quiet mode.
That would be good.
She's dead, you're in shock, but then you're like, oh wait, that gas that we saw earlier, that's a lit cigarette. And then we start the fun process of allowing the audience to see things that the main characters don't and start to track the way all of it's going to coincide. Now, we know that there's an order to this, and we know that Rory's next, and we can just enjoy the fact that he is now, as described in the script, cut into 3 sharp cuts of beef. And there he goes. The notion of having him be cut into 3 sharp cuts of beef was specifically from writer Eric Bress and John Gruber. They just said, well, what have we seen before? And what haven't we seen? Well, I've never seen a thing where a guy is cut and parts of his body fall off. He ain't dead yet. And then when he collapses, his torso falls forward. They literally described exactly what you saw there and said to the special effects makeup team, good luck, have fun, guys. And that was actually a very hard thing to shoot because you wound up having Rory, his bottom half was covered in green, his top half was leaning over mechanically engineered body parts that were filled with innards, and they had green pipes on either side so they could articulate it as it fell. So they had to literally count down 1, 2, 3, and then he fell one way and the other stuff fell the other way, and it had to be like a choreographed dance to make sure that all the body parts fell in a way that felt real and delivered the goods when it spilled out its contents like a piñata.
A man with hooks is gonna kill you.
Nora is decapitated between elevator doors. This was a very, very challenging sequence for this actor to shoot because she had to be suspended in the air while this was happening. She had to be outside with her neck crammed inside between the 2 elevators because you wanted to get performance. That's the one thing that we always try and do is use our actors as much as possible because there's no better way to sell fear, jeopardy, suspense, tension than what's happening on the actor's face. There you go, bye. This is actually also inspired by a real event. It happened to a guy whose wife was decapitated. They were working at a hospital and he had to spend about 3 hours in the elevator with his wife's head. Tim gets crushed by falling pane of glass. He was originally gonna be 8 years old. The studio said, no, make him older. An 8-year-old looking like this. What's funny is that the first time we did it, the dowels inside the body didn't break, so his legs were still standing. So we had to clean everything up and really score the innards of the second dummy and the last dummy we had and reposition it so the pane of glass would do the job that it needed to do. And thankfully it did. This is one of my favorite sequences. Evan, who gets impaled through the eye by a falling fire escape ladder. One of my favorite things about this sequence is this moment here, where you just see someone put their hand in to get something out, and the audience, knowing the kind of movie that they're in, just immediately turns themselves into knots from anxiety. And when his hand does get stuck, the smoke from the pan and the microwave popping, it's just, you just watch everything go south. And one of the fun parts of Final Destination is just everything going wrong and the person not being able to do anything about it. And you know, the worst thing that could ever happen is for that garbage disposal to turn on. And then he actually manages to escape. So your expectations as an audience member goes back and forth several times throughout the sequence, which, if you can tell, was incredibly challenging to shoot, because that's real fire. And there's another beat here too. Sometimes the things you don't expect get a great reaction. For example, you're gonna watch here, and as he hits the ground, we know there's glass. Just that action of him falling on the glass on his back, audience goes, ah, gosh. Another fake out. This was a David Ellis idea to do this fake out with the timing, and it works great. Oh, good times. Take him to the eye doctor. Alex Browning meeting his maker by a brick falling from a freak off-camera accident. Scheduling did not allow him to return, and in order to keep the sort of mythology working, we had to figure out a way to take him out of the equation, and this was the choice that we came up with. At one point, people said, well, how about a spider bite? But then we realized we're trying our best not to have sentient creatures be a part of Death's design, because then there's zombie spiders running around. You want to keep dogs and animals and snakes and anything that's actually part of their own natural order with their own sentience from being a part of Death's design.
Brian, I think you better go check that barbecue.
Poor Brian getting blown up from a barbecue grill explosion. This is something that all the bits and pieces were set up in the earlier bit where Kat and Rory die, and the payoff to that is here. Poor Brian. I think that this ending is such like a bloody live-action Acme cartoon that you walk out of the theater going, oh my God, I can't believe they did that. And the audacity of it is what keeps these movies fun and entertaining. And you walk out going, that was great. Our Final Destination journey continues with Final Destination 3 from 2006, again directed by James Wong. Total kills, 29. The roller coaster crash. The opening set piece for Final Destination 3, an incredibly spectacularly challenging sequence to film, both emotionally and technically, on the crew and the cast. There was so much that went into this sequence. The kids had to go on the roller coaster 30 times in one night. One of them wound up with a mild concussion, because when you're going through a roller coaster, your brain is whacking around inside your skull. They earned their keep. And the fun of this here was seeing what happens to the human body when it meets a pole at high impact, which we're about to see. Slap! Peace out. Ashley and Ashlyn get incinerated in the tanning bed. The vulnerability of them being completely exposed to the elements inside of that tanning bed makes you so anxious for them.
It's way too warm in here now, huh?
Once the thing starts heating up to the point where you start seeing the consequences on their skin, it just gets unbearable. It leads to what I think is one of the greatest match cuts in cinema history, where after they have become barbecued inside the tanning beds, we then see that same overhead shot of the tanning beds match cuts to the tandem coffins at the graveyard. Frankie Cheeks smashed by a runaway truck at a drive-thru and has his head taken apart by a motor. This was something that Glenn Morgan dreamed up because he found himself stuck in a situation like this in a drive-thru where he realized, I can't get out of the car. There's a car behind me. I'm actually immobilized in here and have to go through a huge amount of contortions to get out of my car. And then he said, well, what if something was coming down the hill to get at me? And this sequence was born. This was also fun because the guy driving this was actually stuck underneath using a mirror to see, because he didn't want to see anybody actually driving it. But he was a professional truck driver using a mirror, and the thing, I got you, I can see. The impact of the truck actually wound up damaging one of the cameras because it had such velocity behind it. I think that speaks to how intense these movies are to make and how creative and safe the stuntmen work to make it safe. Lewis head smashed by an exercise machine. This was another sequence where Mary Winstead's character is sort of trying to see if she can recognize the signs around her so she can not only convince Lewis that he's going to die, but tell him how it might happen. So as she's noticing all the various threats, he is just completely ignoring her and saying, I don't believe you. All I do is win.
That's all I know how to do! Just win!
And it's his hubris and his ego intersecting with death that makes you realize that all the things that we think are going to take him out, including what doesn't kill you make you stronger as a sign, ultimately are the things that miss him.
What I tell you, Kevin, huh? F that!
Now that weight set actually is not a real weight. We designed that for the movie. And so he got a heck of a workout on muscles he'd never worked out before because it's not really an actual exercise machine. It was designed specifically to do what we needed to do, which is right now, when Lewis wins, he just wins.
I just win! That's all I know how to do, Kevin! Baby, I just win!
And just for fun, those shots where the actors get hit with an air cannon full of goo, we called it Gorno, just so you know. Aaron takes multiple shots to the head with a nail gun. Once death triggers its plan, everything starts falling in ways that is been foreshadowed all throughout this sequence. But what isn't foreshadowed, ultimately, is how Aaron meets her fate by falling backwards into the nail gun and nailing her hand to her face. And you'll notice here that it's a combination of a special effects makeup head, but we digitally added her actual eye onto it. So as she sort of sinks and dies, the real actress's eye is on there. And your lizard brain kind of says, oh my God, there's one real thing, and it infuses the rest of the thing with that reality. And it's one of the things that I've learned along the way, that you marry visual effects with practical. The practical will always win out because your brain is wanting to feel the truth of it and not feel the artifice. Perry, impaled to the chest by a broken flying flagpole. Another challenging sequence to work off, and now you may notice that there's a pale horse signifying death that is going to be running around loose. Pulls that thing and takes Perry down, and it was so much fun watching her slide down. Ian McKinley sliced in half by a falling cherry picker crane. One of the fun things about this particular kill is we actually did a reshoot where we added his top half. Originally, he just gets completely taken out, and it was sort of underwhelming. You wanted to see something a bit more spectacular, especially at the end of the movie. So we added his top torso getting kind of squirted out, and he's quietly giving the finger to, to the people who have survived.
You okay? Something wrong?
Julie, Kevin, and Wendy meet their end in a subway train accident. What's great about this sequence is there's only one shot on an actual train. Everything you're seeing here was shot on stage. All the crash was shot with miniatures or on a stage. It was a remarkable example of how none of this is a real train. It's all miniatures, which is cool, which you don't do that much anymore. It'd be all CGI. Doing this all via miniatures and stunts, again, gives it that tactile feel. It feels palpably real. Coming up with ways to kill them was actually more challenging than not. All of the characters ultimately died at the end because you can't cheat death. Final Destination 4, aka The Final Destination, which was shot in 3D in 2009 with director David Ellis. Total kills, 61. We opened Final Destination 4, aka The Final Destination, with a race car crash and explosion, severing people in half. It's just a jolly good time outside in the Deep South. This was actually, interestingly, the largest freestanding set ever built in the state of Louisiana at the time. All the footage here was shot in Mobile, Alabama. So this is all Alabama, but once you have the angles into the stands, that's all done in Louisiana. This is another sequence that had a huge amount of prep because every shot is basically in a different state. One of the things that we were trying to sort of sell here is the idea of being trapped in a crowd. This sequence is ultimately challenging because of the amount of extras needed to make that idea come to life. Nadia decapitated by a flying race car wheel. This was a super fun thing to shoot. She was a lovely actress to work with. The audience reaction, not just to the impact, but you'll see in just a moment how we show the aftermath, generates a huge reaction in a theater with lots of people. Good night. Look at her foot twitching. Good times. All Carter Daniels dragged by a pickup truck, then dismembered and burned alive as the truck explodes. This character is affectionately called the racist because he is a racist pig. And that was one of the things that we wanted to do, is to have a character that you hated so much that watching him die was a euphoric hell yeah moment. The actor who played Carter did a lot of his own stunts, including getting dragged and having his legs caught on fire. He was both game, and it's another example of how we try to work with our talent to make sure that we really feel the presence of the actor inside the moment, so that the stunts feel really real and we're not just cutting to somebody who clearly doesn't look like the actor at hand.
Let's go. Get in the car. I've got my eye on you two.
Samantha, who gets shot through the eye with a rogue stone from a lawnmower. We wanted to have it be an impact like a bus, and we wanted it to sort of be, again, a little bit darkly funny, and a misdirect from the whole set piece inside. It was never about the hair salon. It was always about the lawnmower that bracketed the sequence.
Well, I guess it's not my turn to die. Y'all take care.
Andy gets segmented by the chain link fence after getting struck by a flying CO2 tank. Now, we have often been accused of being live-action Acme cartoons because of our violence and our mayhem. This kill in particular, I think, is the sort of apex of that idea, given how he dies and given the way that we are able to see through his body when he gets pushed through the fence. I believe it was described in the script as pieces like Play-Doh Fun Station fall out on the other side. And this is another example, though, how a thing I do think that is effective is the push and pull of how and when it's gonna get out. You think it's gonna be the truck backing into him, but ultimately it's the CO2 tank flying and taking him out. Hunt disemboweled by a superpowered pool drain. What we wanted to do is create a sequence where we are with the character and his struggle, but everyone around him can't see it. They're not noticing that he's trapped at the bottom of the pool. I've always loved this shot. It reminds me of like shots from Jaws where they're just like swimming overhead. And there's the coin capping the sequence with the irony that the very thing he was looking for winds up next to his kidney. Jonathan crushed by an overflowing hospital tub, which then falls through the ceiling. We've got a guy upstairs who's watching the tub fill up and nobody's paying attention to him. And then you have our guy downstairs who is incapacitated because of his wounds, but is woken up by the water dripping through. But the whole notion is that you don't really think of all the things that's gonna happen. The tub's gonna fall through and take him out. So the cross-cutting, the back and forth, and then interacting with our leads trying to get to him to try and save him was the way we tried to wring some tension out of this thing, and something that would be unexpected. Particularly the shot of him pulling out the tube. One of the coins of the realm of Final Destination are cringy physical moments, like scraping under somebody's fingernail, pulling out an intubation, just things in the human body that are very small, but they just give you that ick factor. Now, I will say that the hand of him trying to hit the button was my hand.
I think we just keep an eye out for any signs of danger. I think we got a shot, okay?
George hit and splattered by a speeding ambulance. Don't blink, because it happens fast.
It's like deja vu. My wife said that deja vu is like God's will.
Bringing back the idea of a bus hit is sort of like when you look at the various ways each of the sequences can be structured. That's an obvious and effective thing to do. I think that we probably tipped too close to being too obvious a one-to-one comparison with the bus hit from the original. But I think a shocking kill that comes from an unexpected means is a very worthy thing to try and do. But I agree that perhaps this one was a bit too close to Terry's bus hit for good comfort. Janet, Lori, and Nick crushed and smashed by an 18-wheeler.
What if we didn't change anything?
What are you talking about?
What if us being here, right now, was the plan from the beginning?
We couldn't afford to actually hit them and have all the stunts and do everything, so we said, you know what? We have the opening credit sequence, so let's just mimic that aesthetic here and really like have fun with the violence. And I think it's effective. Final Destination 5 from 2011, directed by Stephen Quayle. Total kills, 94. This is the North Bay Bridge collapse, and this is really where I think the sequence starts teetering into disaster movie territory in the best possible way. We had an opportunity to have access to the Lionsgate Bridge up in Vancouver for only 2 hours. Everything else you see we built on stage or was digitally extended. You can imagine the amount of prep that went into the sequence, but I think everybody when you go onto a bridge of this size just feels, I know there's 600 feet of nothing beneath me. If there's any wind, you feel it kind of shimmy and sway a little bit. If a car goes by or a bus that you're seeing on screen, you feel the macadam kind of buckle and bolt. It felt like a very obvious and very accessible location for a Final Destination opening sequence. It provided us with an awful lot of opportunity for fear of heights, to capitalize on people trying to get themselves out of circumstances where there seems to be no hope, and a lot of just sheer physicality of, as you see here, buses dropping, cars dropping, buckles getting smashed from the pressure. This was a sort of fun sequence where we had a 30,000-gallon dunk tank dropping water on an upside-down bus, so it went down toward the ground, but by the camera position, you realize, oh, it's going in. This sequence alone, out of, I think it was a 63-day schedule, we spent 19 days shooting 6 minutes of movie because it was so technically complex. Candace's spine snapped backwards upon impact with the ground during a gymnastics sequence gone awry. To me, it's a masterclass of suspense, where you identify multiple things that are actually dangerous or a threat that might work together to take out poor Candace, and yet the thing that gets the most traction is just a tiny screw on a balance beam. Now, the thing about gymnastics and why the sequence works is it's got athleticism, it's got artistry, it's beautiful, but at the back of your mind when you're watching it, you're thinking, that looks really dangerous. They're gonna really hurt themselves. And it's that energy we wanted to tap into in this sequence, and I think that we did it in spades. It's great. Ugh. No good whatsoever. When you see the human body doing something it shouldn't, it's just incredibly shocking to see her body snap and fold in half and do something that no human body should ever do. That one image just makes your whole brain go, stop, make it go away, but you can't look away because it's Final Destination.
Yo, Buddha, slow down on the rice cakes.
Isaac having his head get crushed by a falling metal Buddha statue.
Oh. Wait a second, what happened to the younger version of you?
This sequence was super fun to shoot because not only was the actor a joy to work with, but this goes back to that idea, the simplest things like acupuncture, needles going into skin, and then when he falls chest first onto the ground, it's just so distressing, the prospect of you immediately start feeling all those needles enter your own body. Oh, shit. Interestingly, this was actually a reshoot as well, in the sense that he did die by fire the first time we shot it, but it didn't feel like it had the impact of some of the other sequences. So we wound up creating a dynamic where he backed into the wall and had the Buddha, because when he went in initially and tapped the Buddha's belly and said, you know, hey, you gotta work on, go on a diet there, that was just the actor ad-libbing. But we said, aha, that's our setup for how the sequence can actually end.
Deep breath.
Olivia getting her eye burned out by a LASIK eye surgery machine and then falling out of a window and smashing onto a parked car.
I'll be right back.
Hold on, you're leaving?
This was one of the most grueling sequences for an audience to watch. In fact, the writer, Eric Heiser, got the job when he walked into the conference room at New Line, just sat down and said, laser eye surgery. This sequence was also obviously very challenging for our actress because she did do all of her own stunts, except falling out the window, of course. Having the clip in her eye to open it up, she was a total baller and was a joy, and that didn't work out so well.
No, we gotta move, man.
Roy, who gets impaled through the head by a large construction hook, This is also a demonstration of if you take someone's life, you get the life they have left.
You traded spots. He should have your death, and you should have his ears.
Did he push him, or did he try to stop him from falling? And that's the question that is going to plague that character.
Roy, you okay down there?
They mirror the order everyone died in on the bridge.
Then who would be next?
Who wants to be the first to tell me what the hell just happened?
Who is it, Sam?
Who's what?
He wound up killing Dennis by smashing and impaling him through the face with a flying wrench.
Where's Dennis? No shit.
Something that we thought was effective because the characters are actually debating, well, wait a second, if you did push him out of the way, or maybe you didn't, if that's the case, then you took his life, then who's actually next? And the next person happens to be the person who walks up, and then wham, Dennis was next.
Are you okay? What's going on?
It's Peter. He has a gun.
Agent Jim Block shot 3 times in the back. One of the fun things about the franchise as it's evolved is we are exploring how many different ways can we extract tension from a sequence. And this is one where we decided to do quiet tiptoeing and see if we could play that card, and I think it really is effective and works. Now, obviously, we cap it with Final Destination stuff, but we have very rarely had a killer hunting somebody for real inside of a set piece, because that's not what it is. Death is invisible, right? But for the first time, we have an actual antagonist in the physical world in this movie that's working, if not in concert, side by side with death itself.
Peter.
Peter gets impaled in the chest with this very large meat skewer. Another very interesting stunt, because that's a practical effect. There's no digital. When you see this, they've designed a rig that allowed him to be standing just kitty corner and have an actual spear come through. That's why it actually looks real, because it is. I know that sounds banana pants, but watch this. So when Nathan killed Roy, he got the time that Roy had left, and that takes us to the bar.
I still can't believe he's gone, though.
Yeah, no kidding.
I guess it was for the best. Turns out Roy had an enlarged blood vessel in his brain so big, he's about to burst. They said he'd be dead any day now.
Any day.
Life's a bitch.
We built this bar on set and actually dropped the nose wheels from an actual 747 for real through the roof into the set. Again, Final Destination does its best to work practically, and this is an example of the practical effects at their finest. Now, the hand and the intestine piece, not real, but the actual wheel, totally real. Molly getting bisected through the waist, and then Sam is burned alive.
Get on the wheel! You're gonna eat that!
What's all that about?
I have no idea.
The twist on this movie, the heroes from Final Destination 5 are actually on the plane from the first Final Destination. That Final Destination 5 is actually a prequel. Not only is one of the great reveals that I've ever been involved with, and the audience seemed to respond positively, but it was actually something that we came up with for Final Destination 3. They were all gonna meet on the train at the end of that, but because of actor scheduling, we couldn't do it. So we just tabled that idea, and it wound up being a perfect fit for this movie.
Oh my God!
Not so perfect for poor Molly, because you're gonna see now.
Molly, hold on!
Oh, that's too bad. You know, she's twice as nice now. We did not have any of the actors come back. It was purely designed specifically so that the only shot that we would have from the original film is looking over Sam onto the footage itself. It was a green screen composition. The reverse shot, where they were moving in the foreground, we just had doubles wearing the same wardrobe from the original movie, so that it would pass through frame and you would get a sense of that action to tie the whole thing together. Final Destination 6, also known as Final Destination Bloodlines, directed by Adam Stein and Zach Lipovsky, and the total kills, well, you're gonna have to see to find out. What I will say about Final Destination Bloodlines is by making another Final Destination, we can give a younger generation their own Final Destination to see in theaters. They've had the opportunity to watch them on Max and on Blu-ray, but this is the first time they'll have the chance to see it in the theater. The reason why we've been able to make sequels to the original Final Destination is because the conceit of the movie is so pure and so fresh and so interesting, and at the time was totally different than any other horror movie that was out. It's the kind of idea that you can actually put anywhere. You can put it in outer space, you can put it in the Old West. It's the idea that death is all around us and coming after us, and how can we possibly survive?